Hello everyone and welcome to the Force Plate Coach YouTube channel. My name is John McMahon and in this video I'm going to explain how to calculate benchmarks for force plate metrics or indeed any other performance data that you may be collecting with your athletes. Now first off, there are many ways to define benchmarking, but for me it's about setting targets for specific sports groups and subgroups that consider a variety of factors, for example position, age, sex and level of play. We can only really be confident with our benchmarks for given test metrics if they've been formulated wherever we can from large normative data sets, because this allows us to create standardized scores that can then be applied to enable the creation of performance bands, and then from there we can create benchmarks for individuals or groups of athletes from that point forward. So the approach I discussed in this video is all to do with a peer-reviewed journal article that my colleagues and I had published open access back in November 2022. You'll be able to access the article in a link that will be included in the description below the video. So if anyone wants to read that, then please do. It will give more methodological detail to what I'm going to talk about here, but I'm hoping that this video will be a nice supplement, and obviously I'm hoping it'll be easier to explain how we actually did the analyses in that paper. So first off, it's important to note that the method that we used is based on the data from the jumps. It was counter movement jumps that we used in that particular study. It depends on them being normally distributed, and I'm sure most of you have seen this normal distribution bell-shaped curve 1,000 times before, but just as a simple reminder, it shows us how much of a normally distributed data set will fall within multiples of the standard deviation around the mean. So for example, we can expect that around 68% of normally distributed data will reside within one standard deviation on either side of the mean, and that mean is represented by 0 on that x-axis that you can see underneath the bell-shaped curve there, and that coincides with the middle and so the highest portion on the curve itself. Now the z-score is referred to and gives us a calculation of how many standard deviations above or below a group mean value a given test score is. So often for us that's an individual athlete within a group, and that group could be like a typical squad or maybe a cluster of athletes that are grouped based on, say, pre or circa or post peak height velocity, for example. And it's a common statistic that's used in sports science, and it's also applied for benchmarking purposes. Now most z-scores will range from a value that's -3 through to +3, but they can exceed those bounds, especially within athletic populations, so you could see values ranging from -5 to +5, for example. Now for the sake of this video, if we provide a group mean and standard deviation for counter movement jump height, and that's taken from the earlier mentioned journal article from the BACS data in particular, then we can see a worked example of what a z-score ranging from -3 to +3 would be based on these data. So for example, if you look in that x-axis now, it's been updated, and for example an athlete who jumped 27.4 centimeters from that group will have attained a z-score of -2. So in other words, that would be 2 standard deviations below the group mean, whereas any athlete that jumped 40.9 centimeters will have attained a z-score of 1, or in other words 1 standard deviation above the mean. So those examples are really easy to see because they correspond directly to the x-axis value shown below that bell-shaped curve. But as an example, if we saw an individual that jumped outside of those bounds, so say 43.6 centimeters, then we can calculate the z-score for that athlete through the following formula, whereby we will subtract from the athlete score the group mean score and then divide the answer by the group standard deviation. So for this example with the numbers you can see in blue there, this athlete will have attained a z-score of 1.6. So in other words, they performed in the counter movement jump for height to the order of 1.6 standard deviations above the group mean. And that yellow circle that you've seen just appear there on the graph just denotes where that 1.6 as a z-score would reside. So you can calculate the z-score for any individual athlete within a data set, and if you were to do that, you may expect to see something that looks like this, where you've got all of those blue circles that represent individual z-scores for a range of athletes. However, in my experience, and I know others share this same sentiment, it can be difficult for the z-score to be interpreted easily by athletes and even some practitioners, and that obviously then reduces their ability to quickly interpret the information and apply any resultant scores to their athlete's training program. So an alternative approach to this is to calculate a modified t-score, and that can be done again with the numbers shown in blue there, where we take the z-score, multiply it by 10, and then we add 50 to the answer. So in this example, that previously mentioned z-score 1.6 would equal a score of 66, So typically Z scores will range between 20 and 80, which you can see just on that bell-shaped curve x-axis below. But they also could go from 0 to 100, just like the Z scores can range from -5 to +5. So in effect, you can think of a T-score as a score out of 100, which automatically is a more familiar scale. So now you can see how the T-score corresponds to the Z scores, both through, like I just said, the x-axis in the bell-shaped curve, but you can also see it in that table that just came in on the right. And now the T-score on its own actually is usually easier for athletes and practitioners to interpret, just because we tend to be more familiar with scores out of 100. But you can see that yellow tick that's shown in that table, which will give you an idea of where the athlete who jumped 43.6 centimeters would be placed, whether you use a Z score or a T score. Now, because the Z score is less intuitive and we feel ourselves that the T score is more intuitive, especially for the intended end user, we didn't include the Z score in our study. So instead, we focused on creating performance bands from those T scores. Because that's been done a little bit in some of the literature, but not to the same extent as we've done in this study. And the idea was to help create these qualitative descriptions to further aid interpretation, particularly ease of interpretation of any data that's calculated. So for example, we could say that the athlete that jumped 43.6 centimeters in this example will have attained a good score considering their sport, position, level of play, or whatever else is relevant. So the assumption here is that this athlete is a back within rugby league, and we're using that data from the previously mentioned study to derive this performance band that we mentioned that equates to a good score. So again, now you've got a qualitative description that couples with a more intuitive score out of 100, that being 66, which hopefully improves our understanding to apply that data quickly. And then finally, we added a traffic light system to the T-score performance bands just to aid data visualization. So in essence, the T-score bands with their associated qualitative descriptions and the colour code act collectively to ultimately benefit the end user, and then these can be used to set benchmarks for athletes to aspire to. Now, it's important to note that the accuracy of the T-score performance bands depends entirely on the precision of the group mean and standard deviation used to calculate them. So the precision of a group mean and standard deviation tends to improve with a larger normative data set. So if you keep an eye on the figure on the left-hand side, this currently shows the data distribution for just one team of athletes, like of a typical number you might expect to see in sport. And then you've got the corresponding performance bands for jump height in that table on the right-hand side. Now, if we were able to collect more teams, you can see how the figure will update on the left. If we go up to 2 teams, for example, and then again up to 3 teams. And you can see how it improves the data distribution and it fills the gaps effectively if we end up collecting multiples of data and pooling it together. Now, the assumption there that the data is standardized in the way it's collected, and obviously the athletes are grouped together only if, for example, they're senior athletes from the same level of play and same sex, as an example, just to make sure that we're not moving or merging data together from different cohorts. So that effectively enters into the calculations to change the performance bands that you can see in the table on the right hand side that you'll have seen evolve there as we move through those 3 different slides. So in my opinion, we need to do more multi-site testing like this. I know it's fairly difficult to do, but the tech is allowing us to do this more often now. And it's important that we standardize the protocols if we are to do that, and that hopefully will overcome the small sample sizes that we often see in sports science and medicine studies in particular. Now, in terms of the study that we referred to earlier, you can see the data distributions for 2 of the 3 counter movement jump metrics that we included. And this is the table in this slide right now where you can basically get the real information we intended the practitioner and researchers who work in rugby league to take from the study. So for benchmarking applications, for example, if you take that athlete earlier who got that good jump height score of 43.6, when we compare it to that data shown for the rugby league backs, they might be set, for example, a jump height benchmark of 45 centimeters to reach that very good band for a back following a reasonable period of physical training. So I've created this basic Google Sheet to help you calculate the T-score, and it follows on from everything else that I've discussed already in this video. The link to the sheet can be found in the description directly below the video for you to download and save to your own computer. All you've got to do first of all is just enter the squad or normative data mean value for any given metric and the corresponding standard deviation. So for example, you can enter that information into cells C7 and C8, where you can currently see 36 plus or minus 2 centimeters currently, because I'm using jump height as an example like I've discussed throughout the video. Then all you need to do is simply enter the individual athlete's score for that same metric into cell C10, and it's showing they've scored 36 centimetres in the current example on the screen, and you'll notice that that's identical to mean, and therefore that corresponds to a t-score of 50, as I've already explained earlier on in the video. So you can literally enter any data you want into the sheet. Now obviously don't make it up like I'm going to do now, but let's say for example if you've got a squad with a mean jump height of 35 centimetres and they've got a corresponding standard deviation of 3 centimetres, and then let's say for example you've got an athlete within that squad that jumps 38, so if I just enter that there, that's going to give them a corresponding t-score of 60. Now you know already that 60 equates to good based on the descriptions explained earlier, but they're also shown in that table there on the right hand side. So I've changed, you'll notice on the top, if I just bring my cursor in, the word description for level. So I'm trying that out for the first time in this video, so please let me know what you think about that in terms of the comments section. But effectively it is a level that ranges from extremely poor to excellent depending on what t-score band the athlete achieves for a given metric. So as you'll notice, the conditional formatting will automatically be applied and it'll give the corresponding colour that's shown in this table. So that's why the 60 in here automatically turn green. So for example, if we pick out another value, so if we pick another band, let's say 27 centimetres for example, if I just enter that in here, that should give us red. There we go, that does work, that's good. So effectively that's giving you a t-score of 23, and you can see that corresponds to the same red that denotes the very poor band just here. So please try it out, let me know if you have any issues. You'll be able to see the formulas when you download the sheet. So for example, if you click on any of these jump height values, you'll see in the top in the formula bar when it shows when you download it exactly what those formulas are. I'll make sure that I lock them so that people can overwrite the data. It's important that you download and save a copy to your own device before you do, and that should help with that. So I'll lock off those cells. You can also copy those formulas if you want and paste them into your own version of Google Sheet or even Excel potentially if you want to explore these calculations for yourself. So if you want me to show you how to apply this on a larger data set, for example the whole squad's worth of data, or even how to integrate it into test reports like we do quite routinely, then please comment in the section below. So thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any questions at all, then please put those in the comments directly below this video. Alternatively, you can catch me via Instagram or Twitter on the handle that you can see @ForcePlateCoach in the center of the screen there. Speak soon.